Hearing the name H3 used to invoke a reaction of praise for one of the most beloved YouTube channels in history, known best for tightly edited commentary videos that would take aim at some of the bad actors on the internet.
You're talking about 8-year-olds spending $100 to open a virtual crate for the chance of winning Yeezys or $250 million house? I mean, you have to be 8 years old to believe that that's real.
But over the past year, they've started to invoke a very uncomfortable grimace towards their live podcast that easily clears dozens of hours in runtime each month. Now, on some level, this shift to a lazier format, or at the very least one that is way easier to mass produce, makes a lot of sense. Once you've made your name and fortune, why would you possibly keep going with the all-nighters, caffeine addiction, and social isolation when you could just chill? Make content that requires a tenth of the work but makes triple the money. And while that transition would seem like it would be an easy one, it isn't always seamless. In fact, I would argue that it comes with a major trap that can take a beloved and respected creator and turn them into something unrecognizable. And arguably the greatest example of this can be seen with Ethan and Hila Klein themselves, who went from championing free speech on YouTube and cementing the right to criticize others.
The wording that the judge put into the opinion is gonna strengthen fair use across YouTube.
To threatening to dox and sue critics on Reddit while they unironically engage in months-long takedown campaigns against others.
You people are scum. You have dedicated your lives to harassing me, my loved ones, my crew. If there's any justice in the world, they will lose everything that they care about. And I will be the one that makes them lose those things through legal means.
So what exactly is this trap that I'm so convinced they've fallen for? Well, it all starts with their rise. See, while these days the duo are known for the H3 podcast, usually live streamed for hours at a time, that's of course not where they got their start. Instead, they made their name on the YouTube channel H3 Productions, where they eventually emerged as one of the most notable faces in the commentary genre, with a focus on calling for content creators to hold themselves to a higher standard.
And that's true. That's what's so messed up about Logan and Jake's audience. These are kids. They can't tell the difference between what's right and what's wrong. They don't have a critical voice in their head, right? And what Logan does is he takes full advantage of them.
Now, since this format was personality and opinion based, just like their current podcast, you'd expect their newest content to feel like a natural continuation, right? But in reality, the two formats couldn't be more different. I mean, sure, back in the commentary days, they were giving their opinions and poking fun at people, but they were usually doing so on videos that were roughly 10 minutes long, often much shorter. Also, these videos would usually be uploaded no more than once a week. This all means two things. One, for Ethan, who generally acts as the main face of the channels, to talk about something, it was probably going to be a topic he cared for and therefore knew a lot about and had something worth saying. And two, these videos were generally reactive in nature, not taking away from the talent and achievement of this era, but seeing a video of a guy being a creep and making fun of him for being a creep, it's hard to mess that up.
Mommy makeout day. No, Chris, no, you didn't just say mommy makeout day. You cannot say that with a straight face.
It also helps that a lot of H3's top videos were about topics that were very popular to dunk on, like with inappropriate pranks, the Paul brothers, or promoting gambling to children. There's a reason why you don't often see commentary creators getting into controversy over their own content. They've historically stuck to topics where most people are already on the same page, meaning it's easy to know where the line is for a given topic. Not to mention that the internet was still very much the Wild West at the time, where a lot of behavior that is now frowned upon, like edgy humor or use of slurs, were more than fair game at that time. Also, being able to edit content before releasing it is a really big advantage from a PR perspective. Assuming you act as your own editor, every word out of your mouth is being reviewed at least 3 times before anyone else hears it. Not to mention that the more reserved Hila would often rein Ethan in when he would start approaching the line.
They're so unself-aware. I can't.
I don't know if you can call her a bitch, though.
She is a bitch. She's a fucking bitch. You're right. I call her a see you next Tuesday.
So while this is a bit ironic coming from me, it's not that hard to become likable with commentary content. Quite literally, everything is working in your favor to put your best foot forward. And in the case of H3, it helps that they were funny and charming, not to mention relatable. Add their victory in one of the most important lawsuits in internet history, and it's hardly a surprise that this duo became some of the most popular and beloved YouTubers ever. So what happened? Well, the grind of YouTube, it can get old. I mean, throughout the 2010s, YouTube became more focused on consistent uploads with longer runtimes, hence why tightly edited content like vlogs, sketches, and song parodies became less viable than gaming Let's Plays, podcasts, and live streams. Before long, it became much more lucrative to spend a few hours on a 30-minute video every day rather than dozens of hours on something that was too short to run mid-roll ads on. So as YouTubers started to move towards podcasting, Ethan and Hilo were some of the first to lead that charge in 2017, and the format itself is unrecognizable from what you'd find today. While recent episodes of H3 podcasts are mostly live hangouts, in its original form, the podcast was an interview format, much like Ear Biscuits and Shane and Friends were. But even that is kind of a lot of effort. Like Justin Roiland, Post Malone, Shane Dawson, there were some pretty big names appearing that required scheduling and coordination, not to mention some level of editing. I mean, hell, both the H3 podcast and Ear Biscuits have almost completely abandoned the idea of having guests because the effort just wasn't worth it.
As far as the waning interest in interviews, part of it was practical. You're subject to these people, guests showing up, having to be booked, having to pick people. Are they the right kind of candidate? Do we want to talk with them? Do we have things to say? It was a whole thing.
There would be time that would go into learning about them and watching their videos and then coming up with some semi-intelligent questions. And that process became a little more like homework to me about a subject that I wasn't interested in.
Thus began the slowly increasing list of cuts that the podcast would make. This started with them replacing the guest-based formats with shows that had a built-in co-host, like with Trisha Paytas with Frenemies or Hassan Piker for Leftovers. And in fairness, these formats were still pretty highly produced for podcasts, especially Frenemies. But then both shows ended up imploding due to personal conflicts between the clients and both Hassan and Trisha. So okay, might as well strip things down further. No more editing, just a live stream with the switchboard. Ethan can just bounce off of his crew instead of having to risk a personal bond getting in the way, and he can largely just react to whatever content is brought in front of him. Essentially, while it is still a podcast, the format has more in common with reaction streams than anything else. And this shift has marked Ethan at by far his most controversial. But why? I mean, somebody gaining fame and fortune before growing out of touch is a tale as old as time. But what's so interesting about this happening here is that I think the shift to quote-unquote lazier content, while often more lucrative, comes with a set of traps that can practically force this change. And it's a trap that Ethan and Hila aren't alone in springing. What do I mean? Well, first, the main benefit to lazier content is also the biggest drawback, and that's sheer quantity. Like having every thought that you express for hours a day being streamed to the internet, that's risky. I mean, everyone has bad opinions, right? Or at the very least, opinions that boil down to simple preference that you can't necessarily defend. Generally, you keep those to yourself because it's not worth it, especially when you're a content creator. Everything you say is going to face some level of scrutiny, so might as well stick to more concrete or unimportant topics. But when you're trying to fill hours of uninterrupted airtime, eventually you're going to start scraping the bottom of the barrel, especially when dead air is the enemy of retention. So over the past year, they found themselves in a weird cycle of presenting an unfounded opinion, it being posted to Reddit or TikTok, which causes them to get pushback, and responding by desperately trying to justify an opinion that didn't need to be shared in the first place. For example, you had Ethan and Hila giving their take on Markiplier. You know, one of the most universally beloved creators, someone with a squeaky clean image that if you're going to start something with, you better be damn sure you've done your homework. Yeah, out of nowhere, Ethan and Hila came out with this.
And by the way, I'm gonna go on record right now, and I'm gonna say the same thing about Markiplier. He fakes his voice from the beginning. That is not what he sounds like. Find a video of him younger. I haven't, but I'm telling you I'm right.
Well,
but I'm telling you, he has the same voice. He's faking it. He is faking his fucking voice. There's no question in my mind. I was right about him, and I was right about Markiplier. Sorry.
Can I ask the research team to look into old Markiplier videos?
Yeah, they really gave us the slam dunk that someone's voice changed as they got older and became more comfortable on camera. It's so weirdly unnecessary to bring it up at all, let alone asking their team to look into it. But again, we're well over an hour into an almost daily podcast. When you're filling hours of airtime every single week, you stop speaking because you have something to say and start speaking just because you have to keep talking. And immediately they take it even further.
Markiplier's psychotic like that. Like he's a psycho. You could tell. And so he is someone that can
wait, hold on.
to
What?
faking his voice.
You can just tell.
You can absolutely tell.
Thank you for backing it. So he is a psycho. And he is capable of doing something that extreme, of faking his deep voice for like 20 plus years.
Worth pointing out that only the crew members push back on this, but Ethan and Gila, the two who have directly experienced the shift to lazier content, are the ones who instinctively double down. So we end at labeling an introvert for being more energetic on camera as psychotic. Isn't that a weird battle to pick for two people who built their reputation on calling out actual ethical issues in the creator space, especially when plenty of autistic people describe having to mask their monotone voices just to be socially accepted? Not saying that applies to Mark, and it doesn't really matter if it does, but turning something so innocent into something malicious just because you don't vibe with someone can have much larger implications. So once upon a time, Ethan and Gila's motivation for speaking up online was them trying to make the internet better, but now all it takes is...
That being said, he annoys me because...
It's just
because of his voice, and because people like him and nobody else sees it like I do. And also, he unfollowed me because I tweeted a green pie.
There's the truth.
And to be clear, I don't particularly care about the take itself, but in any context, I feel like it's just weird to publicly express your dislike for someone if said dislike doesn't stem from anything tangible. And it's even weirder to double down multiple times and use the fact that nobody agrees with you as evidence that you're right.
I'm looking at chat, and there's not one fucking person in this chat that's like, oh yeah, Markiplier's annoying. That annoys me. That's what annoys me. Don't you guys see?
But you can tell there's a certain inflection that he's mastered.
I absolutely,
he's an entertainer.
He's a professional broadcaster.
Yeah, also
maybe you could take a couple lessons from him on enunciating.
Yeah.
He's a phony baloney also.
And this isn't an isolated thing by any means. There is a long history of these podcasts producing harmful clips that just didn't need to happen. Like Ethan's checkered history with Philip DeFranco, where during Frenemies, Ethan and Trisha just kept making fun of and commenting on DeFranco's body.
Okay, first of all, regarding that Philip DeFranco footage you showed me, I feel like for some reason you just want to call him fat.
Absolutely not. But if you're gonna call me out for being fat and skinny, then call him out for being fat and
Wait,
skinny.
hold on. And it looks like he gained a few pounds.
You're being very nice as opposed to calling Tan a fucking Twinkie.
Philip DeFranco, I admit, looks heavier than you would expect.
And even years later, Ethan continued to make these kinds of remarks.
Who would you pair me up against, theoretically? Probably Philly D, right? But he's taller than me.
How much taller?
He's doughy though. He's
yeah,
doughy.
I don't think. I mean, he's lost.
He's soft.
A lot of weight.
No, but he's like permanently doughy.
Yeah, I mean, probably.
He's just got that soft, doughy look to him.
We call that in my family a ham sandwich.
He is a ham sandwich, most definitely.
Eventually leading to him publicly begging them to stop.
To Ethan Klein, can you stop talking about my weight on your podcast? By the way, it's well documented that I've talked about myself having an eating disorder that I've had to really fight to overcome over the years. So when you say on your podcast to hundreds of thousands and if not millions of people that I am permanently doughy, that I am a ham sandwich, it's and I think it can have a genuinely negative impact on other people.
Mind you, Ethan is someone who has rightfully reacted with disgust when someone has body shamed himself or his wife.
But I think most people would agree that calling someone's wife a horse is
Right, but like I said to that, like you did call Tana a Twinkie. Like I think that's like something he thinks is funny.
Yet when Phil responded, Ethan's first reaction was to somehow make himself the victim.
When's the last time Philly clickbaited me for something good to say, congratulations, Ethan, you did a good thing today? I didn't know you had an eating disorder or even that it affected you. The part that rubbed me a little, or I guess I was just like, damn, why did, like he's doing this really specific call out like against me for like body shaming him. Is it a little ironic that when he's talking about not body shaming people, he shows like this picture of me, which obviously is supposed to ingest.
I mean, it's just a goofy haircut. It's something
I look fat.
You have total control over.
There was also an infamous moment where Ethan mocked Cutie Cinderella's distress over the rise of AI-generated explicit images of her.
What is going on with you?
Sorry, don't mind me.
If you are able to look at women who are not selling themselves or benefiting off of being seen sexually.
She doesn't have to accept my apology. I don't know if she accepts my apology. But I did apologize to her.
And while initially Ethan gave that sincere apology, more recently he came into conflict with Cutie's boyfriend Ludwig. See, Ludwig had pointed out that during Ethan's latest content nuke, he presented a doctored image as factual.
She won a Rising Star Award at the Streamer Awards, an award show put on by her friends. And then the next year, guys, she gets nominated for Rising Star again. Are they?
Now, I tried messaging to deal with it offline, but this is just wrong And not only like wrong information, it's like fake and doctored information. This screenshot is fake, okay? How do I know it's fake? Because I watched the award show. And when I did a bit of research, I did a reverse image search, I find out this fake image came from Destiny's subreddit a few months ago. To be clear, it is true that she was nominated in 2021 and lost, and then was again nominated 2022 and then won. But she's not been nominated in like, I guess 3 years now.
And Ludwig calling this out makes sense. Since Cutie is the one behind the Streamer Awards, of course he's going to correct someone being flat out wrong about his girlfriend's work. And throughout this correction, Ludwig makes it very clear how disinterested he is in any kind of feud with Ethan.
I don't talk about Ethan. I don't ever talk about him. I don't know why he pulls me and Cutie into shit.
I think it's weird.
I'd rather it not happen. He can do what he wants. I'm playing video games over here. Leave me alone. Leave my girl alone. You don't gotta pull up pictures of her and make fun of her again.
And not only that, Ludwig goes out of his way to state that he doesn't even like the creator that Ethan was criticizing.
First off,
at the stream.
Look, I won't speak for Cutie. I'm not friends with Frogan. I don't particularly like Frogan.
So he just wanted to take a couple of minutes out of his stream to point out a small mistake that Ethan made. And yet in response to this, he went off on Ludwig multiple times, at one point using the song that he had played during his initial incident with Cutie, which in my opinion, kind of makes that previous apology a moot point now that you're standing by your behavior once you don't like them. You know? In fact, this is such a recurring issue for the show that they specifically changed their setup so that they're always streaming at a 30-second delay and have a button on standby that allows them to cut moments like this.
So we push the button and it dumps 20 seconds.
20 seconds retroactively. So from the moment the button is pressed, it's rewind time. And yeah, the stream itself is on a 30-second delay.
Which, to be clear, I think that's a good idea, to implement some kind of filter that allows for hindsight when they speak. But that hasn't been enough to overcome this hurdle, partially because it doesn't always work.
We're doing it.
What are you doing?
It's so awkward and terrible.
I'm sorry, I'm not...
Just like, this is what I'm talking about when it's always like...
We need to get home for our kids.
It's like, bro.
Oh, no, I didn't want to finish it right now. I was just talking about finishing Wednesday.
On Friday. You guys, like...
And partially because when you start getting into more personal topics for them, the 30 seconds aren't enough. And that's where you get some wild clips, a lot of which centers around their latest feud with Hassan Piker, a feud that is largely based on their opposing views on the crisis in the Middle East, which culminated in Ethan posting a 2-hour takedown of Hassan to the H3H3 Productions channel. And since Ethan has made many follow-up streams about Hassan, despite the latter barely replying to his video. And in doing so, he's made multiple remarks that have led to pushback because he just won't let this go and clearly can't handle talking about this topic on the fly. Like at one point, Ethan says this.
Jackie Treehorn?
Yeah, he looks like he's at a Jackie Treehorn party. You know, fucking drunk women. Which surprisingly doesn't seem too far off from what he actually does do.
See the problem? How can you make a 2-hour takedown of someone, not mention that they apparently have this history of predatory behavior, and then just vaguely state so in a stream and not elaborate further? Either Ethan's full of it and is fabricating a dangerous allegation, or he's helping to protect a predator by not elaborating further. All this to say, while Ethan's early controversies were largely centered around occasional edginess, the content of his words was always praised. But more and more, he just seems to keep putting his foot in his mouth while trying to fill hours of unscripted content. Another great example of this is whenever they attempt to discuss the aforementioned crisis. For Ethan and Hila, the latter of whom served in the IDF, this is a very personal topic, so the two just can't help but constantly weigh in and say things that are just not a great look. Like Ethan ridiculing creators for raising $1.6 million for aid.
So creators for Sign raised $1.6 million. That's fantastic. Literally negligible. They've received billions of dollars. It's a good thing. Has $1.6 million had an outcome on anything happening? Absolutely not. Has it helped people? Sure. Has it helped the actual like movement? No. Like raise money. That's good. That's the easiest thing you can do is just give money, right? Good. Let's talk about real activism. Let's talk about enacting meaningful change. Total fucking failures.
While also somehow repeatedly uplifting himself for donating $6,000.
I actually donated $7,000 to Sign Relief, and that's certainly a lot more than negative.
It's also worth noting that Markiplier was the top donator to this organization, one that Hassan is heavily involved in, which might explain H3's sudden interest in attacking Markiplier unprompted. There was also Hila praising someone as a good person who, was an interesting choice.
Just the other day, BB fired a really good guy, the
a lot of people are pissed about, and he fired him because they had a disagreement, and that's like so Trump coded.
He was like a moderating voice in the war room.
Yeah, I do understand that was not a good choice of words, and I would not have said that again.
And this disconnect can even be seen leaching into their higher effort content. Like with Ethan's takedown of Hassan, he presents communism as the greatest threat facing America.
The thing is, there's something kind of scary brewing in America. Communism.
Which is a pretty large disconnect from his usually left-wing audience who would likely be more concerned about the current administration. Like across the internet, you could see people labeling this as the duo shifting to the right and going against the beliefs they had spent a decade promoting. And all of this is just scratching the surface on how their coverage of this topic has alienated much of their viewership.
It feels like 95% of the internet has turned on, let's face it, us.
No, just mostly you.
Collectively.
Yeah, just you.
All of us, man. And let's be real. Let's call a spade a spade. The views are down. We'll get him back.
Ethan had his shortcomings, and I could usually look past them and still enjoy the show. But lately, it's been way too much. The hypocrisy and double standards have just piled up.
But because they're so emotionally invested and are streaming live, they've come to have basically no filter on this, which is consistent with the behavior from their comments on Markiplier. There was no point in bringing it back up, but because the criticism stays in the back of their minds and in their chats, they've developed a reflex for doubling down. Mind you, this has turned into a frequently recurring issue for them. I'm just touching upon some of the most notable examples, and none of this is even mentioning their increasing pattern of hypocrisy. Because yes, loads of people have opinions that are hypocritical, but there's usually a little filter in their brain that prevents them from voicing those. But when you're trying to go hours at a time without dead air, you just gotta say whatever's on your mind. Like remember Ethan's spiel about Markiplier? At one point he fires this barb.
This is my third post for the day of a Let's Play I haven't even watched back. I literally just put it in my sequence and export it without even reviewing it, guys. There's not one cut in this video.
Dog, you are literally in the middle of a live streamed ramble, which is the bulk of your output. How are you in a position to call out lazy content? And with lazy content, there's also a huge conversation that's been had about reacting, where some creators, most vocally Dark Viper AU, have objected to the practice of creators basically re-uploading the hard work of others without any tangible contribution.
Effectively, while some YouTubers will work hard or pay money and spend the time hiring others to increase their output, reactors will simply use the videos produced by their competitors in the market to skip over that process. They avoid the time spent working and managing, as well as the financial expense, but end up with the same end products.
But when Ethan gave his 2 cents on this topic, ironically in a lazy react video—
oh my god, can I skip this? I can't rehash this. I have to skip this. I gotta skip you. I gotta skip you again.
I just skipped like 5 minutes.
This guy's annoying me. Let me just skip forward again. I can't, guys, I can't do it anymore. I can't watch this anymore.
He proceeded to completely ignore this point, and instead he just screamed free speech a lot.
It doesn't matter if somebody's getting exposure. It doesn't matter about impressions. We're talking about free speech. It's free speech. You don't need consent for speech. Commentary is speech. It's free speech. Free speech, it's speech, bro. This guy is advocating for basically stomping on free speech.
Like he completely ignored that the point being raised was about ethics and not legality. Also, that no one was talking about the kind of commentary that the H3 lawsuit centered around. But then, just a year later, Ethan confronted XQC for doing exactly what Dark Viper was talking about, abusing React content to just re-upload other people's work.
Let's say someone comes from your stream. They've watched you all day. They love you. They're a big fan. They watched you react to, let's say, Mr. Beast's new video. Okay? Yeah. And then they come to the homepage, and guess what they see there? Mr. Beast's new video. Do you think are they less likely or more likely to click his video after they saw it on your channel?
Mind you, in both cases, Ethan was just taking the popular stance at that time. Viper had received pushback for a poor use of hyperbole, so Ethan had joined everyone else in dogpiling and ignoring his points. But a year later, a viral tweet had criticized XQC's form of React content, which made public sentiment largely turn against this kind of content. In my opinion, these kinds of moments are just weird and are a really good example of why it's just unnecessary to comment on everything you hear about. There's also the fact that Ethan and Hila Klein are known as heroes of free speech, ones who basically saved the future of creator-driven content. But now they're using lawsuits and threats to silence critics, namely the H3 Snark subreddit, where H3 have deployed copyright strikes to remove damning clips, despite these, in my opinion, falling under fair use. They're also pursuing lawsuits against the moderators and have even threatened to dox them.
I can't wait till I find out who the snarkers are, because I'm going to sue them. Get in line, baby. Oh, they should be worried. I know they're very paranoid. They should be. You'd be surprised how paranoid these snarkers are. The mods, anyway. The head snarkers.
Now, Ethan has denied that the latter was his intent, but either way, it's weird to gleefully celebrate that you as a celebrity are going to be exposing private citizens for having the audacity to disagree with you. And don't get me wrong, I don't like snark subreddits, which are entire forums dedicated to criticizing certain people, but that doesn't mean you should be using slapsuits to silence them, especially when you're the free speech guy. And while Ethan will claim that his reasons are more nuanced, they don't exactly have a history of responding to detractors rationally. For example, when an artist respectfully refused to work with Gila, saying that they couldn't be associated with their company, the duo blamed this on anti-Semitism being aimed at them because of Hassan.
When we talk about how serious the rise in anti-Semitism is, this is why it's scary for us. It's now so casual to just not want to associate with an Israeli just because I was born there. And this is the result of Hassan's type of activism.
When there's literally nothing in the message that you could possibly distort to be implying that. Drawing that conclusion completely ignores the fact that 1, the H3 brand has become increasingly controversial to the point that some might consider it a brand risk, or that 2, they have a pattern now of going scorched earth with former collaborators, including making this kind of unfounded accusation against the artist. And it keeps getting worse, as in their podcast is now arguably doxing random Instagram commenters.
So this is Joe. He left a message on Hila's Star David tattoo. He said, "I'm glad that phase is behind me. Enjoy hell," Joe said. On Star David. Here he is. If anyone, let's see if I know, can identify him at all.
Oh, that weenie truck he's in front of, that's in.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's
owns the truck.
It's at museum, yeah.
Look, I hate hell being used as a threat as much as anyone, but you are not going to convince me that this kind of behavior is okay coming from one of the biggest creators online towards a random comment with 2 likes.
I don't know if any of you guys know him, but certainly anyone who would employ him, or probably even his parents, would be pretty disappointed to see that, although who knows. Here's his mom. I'm not gonna click that for her. I'm not, you know what, fuck him. Here's your mom. I wonder if she knows what you do on social media on your free time. You love your mama.
You sent your millions of fans to harass me and my family. Loser.
And Ethan has since doubled down, saying that the person deserves this because their comment was anti-Semitic. But the comment itself could have easily been referring to Ethan and Gila's behavior overall. While yes, they were getting plenty of other comments attacking their identity, there just isn't enough to make that claim with enough confidence to send hundreds of thousands of people after a random dude. Which brings me to one of their most bafflingly hypocritical patterns that requires a miraculous lack of self-awareness. See, Ethan has expressed repeatedly how much he hates that people are assigning the worst labels possible to him and Gila in order to justify harassing and attacking them.
And again, part of the irony of this whole thing is that on the left, they're basically willing to undermine everything they believe in at the behest of going after Zionists because they see them as subhuman, they see them as Nazis. They've given each other permission and consent and the green light to essentially target whoever they perceive as Zionists with whatever abuse they deem necessary because they're Nazis and they're killing children. I find a lot of anti-Semitism, weird obsessive harassment is pretty much 80% Hassan fans. Yeah, they're also calling me a Nazi for criticizing Elon Musk for being a Nazi. They call me a terrorist. Like there's no limit to what these people will say.
Which, yeah, it makes sense that they would call this out. Yet Ethan will not hesitate to do the exact same thing, like going after the aforementioned Instagram user in a move that would never be considered okay coming from a creator, but justifying it by crying discrimination, or openly encouraging harassment against anyone that he either dislikes or just associates with someone that he dislikes by applying the same exact labels to them.
A lot of these people were Trisha fans just because they seem so focused on like the Zionism thing. And Trisha and Moses are like for real. So I'm wondering, you know, I think Trisha's back on the menu. Let's see if we can get her back on the bathroom floor.
Why would you do this, Hassan? Really? The terrorist endorser? Shame.
I don't know why he even denies that he's a supporter. I mean, stand on your shit. I stand on my shit.
Oh, but of course, it's different when they partake in behavior that they specifically call inexcusable because they're the good guys.
Yeah. I need to emphasize, and I guess I'll continue emphasizing, we are all
Everyone in this room is the good guy.
While moderators say they're facing doxing threats. Yeah, I mean, they're like the mods are the bad guys, the poor... What is with these people?
Yeah, it's not troubling at all that they seem to be well past the point of worrying about going too far. Also, now that their behavior has been getting more mainstream attention, they're just throwing out conspiracy theories in response to any criticism.
I wonder if Hassan hired VR.
I suspect he did, because at the same time,
That
all these puff
also-
pieces came out.
Yeah, that is also like puffing him up and attacking us.
It was suggested to me that it could potentially be Twitch too. I don't know.
Our Twitch stream, which we were rebroadcasting the content nuke from, got banned, suspended for 30 days for broadcasting extremism and promoting terrorism, which is like the greatest outcome I could have hoped for from that.
Though, of course, as soon as anyone else does this kind of speculation...
They dislike botted the video immediately. Lol is at 2.5k dislikes.
Who's they? What are you talking about, man?
And it's funny because Ethan keeps saying that he has proof of the Reddit mods engaging in behavior that warrants this escalating to lawsuits.
How irresponsibly pathetic can you be as a journalist to accuse me, to platform this saying I'm doing conspiracy theories when I've literally said that I have evidence of them doing fucking illegal shit, targeting me for being Jewish mostly.
But based on everything going on, you tell me if you trust his judgment on this without seeing the evidence for yourself. And what's sad is back in 2017, Ethan was acutely aware of how careful you have to be when punching down after you grow a following.
It's so easy to shoot up, right? To punch up. When we were coming up on YouTube, we could talk, say anything about anyone, and like you don't feel the sense of responsibility. You don't feel so much the consequence of what you're saying because you're just some guy. But when you're on top and you become the guy that everyone has that attitude about, it definitely affects you.
All this to say that H3 has increasingly shifted their reputation for the worse in recent years and have alienated much of their audience in doing so. Not to mention have burned bridges with plenty of other creators.
You have everything you could want, and you spend every day sitting on the internet crying and whining and moaning. Get offline and get your mental health in order. You have absolutely lost it. And don't you dare ever disrespect creators for or any other charity again.
We have been invited on more than one occasion to be on the H3 podcast. And we have kind of never responded because we're like, well, I don't want our going on that podcast to be us saying that the things on this podcast are what we endorse.
He has said some really wildly hateful things about Palestinian supporters.
I found out that Ethan has something like 6 different sound effects of me on his podcast. He's using them to mock me as a regular thing for years. I don't know how sick of an individual you have to be to do something like this.
Yeah.
Anissa and Ian. Yeah. Thanks, Anissa, for standing up for your girl. I actually stood up for you so many times because, like, why would I not? But now you choose to hang out with people that would have a problem with you if you defended me.
Mind you, I'm going over the most clear-cut examples of this, but there are countless examples of these moments over the past year, to the point that it's being referred to as Ethan's year-long crash out. Now, of course, this change in behavior most likely stems from factors like money, politics, and their personal lives. But I said that H3's shift to lazier content was a significant factor. What's more, I called it a trap that could land any creator into this position. What did I mean? Well, like I had mentioned, the quantity of content is a very significant component, to the point that there's a whole subreddit dedicated to livestream mishaps since they're just so common. But I think what makes this much worse is a very specific kind of feedback loop. See, for creators, comments are arguably the most significant form of engagement. If you think about it, it's really the only one that's not just a number. It's an idea, a thought, a response. And while creators will often talk about how negative comments can affect them, the opposite is also true. Creators receive a lot of praise from people that follow them, and that praise can feel good. Not to mention make someone more confident in whatever the compliments are aimed at. I mean, even I shifted my content to focus more on media analysis because of comments telling me I was good at it. So for creators making opinion-based content, it's not crazy to think that they would become more and more empowered in thinking that their opinions are the right ones. And for how this applies to H3, just look at how hard they've steered into political content despite their knowledge in this area being spotty at best.
I've even heard they want to repeal Roe versus what? Is that the gay one?
No,
that's
Rover's
Wade has been overturned.
Yeah,
You're talking about gay rights?
Yeah, they want to overturn the
Oberfell.
But this echo chamber becomes a lot worse for creators who focus on takedown content. See, if your output focuses on the unethical behavior of others, then guess what? Their fans aren't going to appreciate that. And if you're taking special aim at creators known for being especially problematic, they likely come with an equally toxic audience. An audience that's going to attack you in swarms without any regards for the point you're making. In other words, your new norm becomes insincere attacks that you quite literally have to block out for the sake of your own sanity. But doing so comes with a massive catch. Because if those insincere attacks turn into genuine feedback and criticism, how are you supposed to know exactly when that switch is flipped? You're so used to having to only listen to the people who say how great you are that you slowly alienate more and more of your audience by refusing to consider them once they start to question you. And if this sounds like I'm making something up or I'm basically speculating, just look at Nick Green. See, Nick is Not Green is arguably someone who had the same exact arc as H3, but much more quickly and dramatically, where he got his start by making fun of content through a left-wing lens, and this was often focused on content that he personally objected to, like content that aimed to put down women.
Like, I'm not saying like you can't bring value to each other, like you work together, like sometimes a woman is your secretary if you're working somewhere, or like you're working, whatever.
Oh, so you can talk to a woman if she's your personal secretary, but not if she's not paid to be near you.
Or creators that were straight up dangerous, like Sneeko.
Now, I don't think I have to explain why this is disgusting. Sneeko is harassing a female content creator, telling her that the reason why she's so upset is because she hasn't had sex in a while, and then he proceeds to aggressively simulate a sexual assault on Chad in his live stream in front of thousands of people.
So unsurprisingly, Nick became hated by right-wing creators and their fans, which led to him receiving countless misogynistic and racist comments on whatever he posted.
I am absolutely not a stranger to hate campaigns like this. I have dealt with months of hate following my coverage on stories like Sneeko, where I was harassed endlessly for uplifting the voices of victims who were attacked just like this.
But eventually, Nick started to shift his focus to lazier content, even by his own admission.
You guys know that I make these videos like the same day, like I wake up and then I make the video and put it out right away.
And because the frequency of his output suddenly rose so rapidly, it left even less of an opportunity for him to consider any feedback. I mean, by the time the audience is responding to one video, he's already moved on to the next, and he eventually admitted that he no longer trusted that his comments represented sincere feedback from his viewers.
Listen, I have no gauge of how you feel about me. I know the comments aren't a very realistic depiction of my actual audience in the way that the greater viewer base on YouTube feels about me.
So eventually, Nick found himself at the center of a major conflict between his friends and the YouTubers behind Super Mega. And long story short, I've already covered this twice, Nick's friend faced swarms of backlash from mischaracterizing events and using unrelated trauma as a gotcha against Super Mega. And because Nick made several videos on the topic where he basically did what he was now accustomed to, rushing the videos out.
Now, if I were to go back and change anything, I do think I should have waited until Matt and Ryan responded to everything before talking about it. If you know my channel, especially at that time, I was posting constantly and I was always trying to be the quickest one to get to a story.
Repeating hearsay as fact and callously discussing very sensitive topics, it left a bad taste in the mouth of his viewers. But remember, he was used to having to assume the worst of his critics, so he quite literally quintupled down on his coverage and lost swarms of his audience before he course corrected.
This is the 5th time I've responded to this, and every single time before this I have done or said things that have made my actions even more harmful.
Like, he's lost over 200,000 subscribers across 2 channels that were both under 1 million subs. And when he finally did face the criticism, his reasoning for initially refusing to is exactly what I described.
I wrote off any of the criticism, basically saying that the people who were making videos about me weren't credible sources in my eyes. They were responding in bad faith. And this isn't something that I have only done in this situation, but it's something that I've done during my past few years on YouTube. I never really took a fair look at what people were saying about me online, because whenever I saw the most aggressive comments, I ignored everything else.
Though it is worth noting that Nick dedicated himself to being more ethical going forward and has done a complete 180 in terms of both upload content and consistency. And honestly, it's a great change to see. Maybe others should start taking some notes, right? Others who have already put away exponentially more money than Nick and absolutely don't need to be making slop content daily. But unfortunately, it seems like Ethan and Gila are continuing to move in the opposite direction, as they've begun to make it clear that they do not plan on differentiating between the masses that are criticizing them across the various subreddits and the extremists that are making this dangerous.
This is probably the most f***ed up thing that these people could do. And it's put me and Hila in the headspace of just, the gloves are off at this point, and you guys will see the effects of that as we move forward through this. But I make no apology. I will do everything that I can to hold any of these people to justice in any possible way that I can. And that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to be happening.
And again, if there's maybe less than 1% of people who are in the snark because they feel like they're wrongfully banned or whatever the hell it is, you need to understand that what you're a part of is more than just something that is claimed to be pro-Palestine. It is literally meant to push people to suicide, to be honest.
And it's not like they're saying mean stuff. Nobody would care if they were just saying mean stuff. Like they're trying to interfere with our lives personally, each and every one of us.
Because let's be clear, Ethan and Gila have always had to deal with their strongest detractors taking things way too far and putting their lives in danger.
So you guys know that we've been victim of swatting. That's why we moved to this house. It happened several times.
And most recently, this included somebody filing a false report with CPS.
This morning, we got a visit from Child Protective Services. An anonymous call went into them on the 3rd, saying that they were somebody that works at the house, and they wanted to report us because our kids are crawling around eating dog shit and getting viruses.
However, when someone in one of the snark Reddits tried to celebrate this, the comments were universally panning this within minutes, because most of the content of these forums are criticisms, even if they do become a bit obsessive. Now, at one point, H3 pulls up a post on one of the snark subreddits explaining that CPS reports are anonymous, meaning there is no evidence linking it to Reddit, let alone proof that the forum is encouraging this behavior, because as we've seen, H3 has developed a habit of arriving at a conclusion and acting on it without restraint, despite not having the evidence to back up this confidence, which they also did in response to the post in question by repeatedly saying it was promoting this method of harassment.
They're posting that making CPS reports are anonymous.
So they're promoting doing it?
How is this not breaking the rules?
Yeah.
How is this allowed on Reddit?
That's crazy.
2 hours, no moderation, and it has 200 points. Guys, please mass report this. This is just such a fucking disgusting, blatant violation. No. This is a serious fucking issue. Like this is not. This has to be dealt with. This is not normal.
When there is nothing in the post that remotely suggests that someone should do this. Think for a moment about how much I dissect the exact words that people use. I have no problem calling a spade, but what they're saying just isn't true. It's exactly what I'm describing, equating restrained criticism to the behavior that absolutely does cross the line. What's more, the CPS agent himself had expressed that the report was most likely filed by someone that knew them personally, though Ethan doesn't even consider the possibility.
They were able to provide enough details because of what I said on the show to make it appear that it was somebody. He said, like, when he first showed up, he's like, it's somebody that you know who made the report. And I'm like, no, okay.
Despite the fact that they had taken their child to the doctor concerning the illness that had been flagged down.
Sonny went to the doctor today to get a poop evaluation, but I'm pretty sure he has it because the symptoms is like frequent and then extremely foul-smelling diarrheas.
And I apologize if it sounds like I'm splitting hairs here, but I truly do believe that it is dangerous to have a platform of this size and make statements of fact that are actually opinion or speculation. Because while I often agree with Ethan and Gila about the most likely scenario that they base their assumptions on, it takes being wrong once for this to become a huge issue. Especially when even in the likely scenario that this was targeted harassment, there is zero evidence that this is anything more than a sole actor. Yet they aren't even considering any scenario that goes beyond their gut reactions. But H3 just aren't able to see the shade shades of gray anymore, which is the end result of this decade-long feedback loop that evolved into a spiral. As much as I criticize several of their defensive moments, it's understandable when this is how far people are taking this. I can't pretend I would be better equipped to handle a situation like this while being constantly broadcast live. This seems like the exact time for the duo to step back and handle this behind the scenes while gathering information instead of doing anything publicly, but the show must go on, right? And I really do think that the format they're committed to, the quote-unquote lazier option, is only going to continue making this worse. Anyone paying attention can see a clear cycle of bitterness between H3, their critics, their fans, and other creators. But without the ability to step back, that cycle is just never going to end. But okay, does this mean that any pivot to more efficient content is going to be that creator's downfall? No, of course not. Plenty of creators have used this pivot to elevate their careers to new heights. Quite notably, this includes Rhett and Link as well as Ryan Higa. See, they all used to be known for scripted videos with one-of-a-kind executions, but an unscripted morning talk show is what landed Rhett and Link on The Tonight Show, and Ryan Higa stopped uploading to his channel years ago in favor of a pretty successful, but intentionally unexciting Twitch career. In other words, both pivoted from making minutes of scripted content every month to hours upon hours of personality-driven content. Yet, when was the last time you've heard of controversy from either of them? And even Shane Dawson had a similar trajectory, yet the vast majority of his controversies are from his past resurfacing rather than his newer content. So does this completely unravel everything that I've said? Is this trap of lazy content nothing more than my desperate attempt to get a good title for this video? No. See, there's a huge difference between the creators who tend to fall for this trap versus the ones that don't, and it's their rise. Almost every creator is going to get caught in that feedback loop of praise from their audience. So like I said, there's a good chance that they'll be more confident in whatever this feedback is aimed at and steer more into it. So in the case of Mythical, Shane, and Ryan, this feedback loop was more based on what they could do. Rhett and Link were praised as entertainers, so they leaned more into being naturally entertaining. Shane and Ryan were praised for being funny and relatable, so their pivot focused on actually having to try less. But for H3, the praise that they had received was focused almost entirely on who they were and what they thought. And if there's one thing we've seen in recent years, it's the unearned confidence one can gain just from enough people placing them on a pedestal. So when you go from viewing YouTube as a grind to passive income, it can be a slippery slope, one that I desperately hope to protect myself from. So in order to make sure that I can't fall to the traps of lazy, pumped out slop content, I'm gonna start developing my following over on Twitter by outputting at least 50 edgy tweets a day, starting right now. What? Everyone's using slurs on Twitter now. What's the worst that could happen? Bye!